how Black Myth Wukong changes the whole gaming industry. With over 10 million copies sold, Black Myth Wukong became the Game of the Year in just 2 days of its release. How could this change the future of video games forever? Here we explain it to you. In 2014, Tencent employees quit their jobs to create their own company, Game Science. They had in mind a video game that would make them shine worldwide, but that would be 10 years later. At the beginning, they created mobile games such as Art of War, Red Tides, having a great success, thus collecting profits to finally build what they had in mind. Create a high-budget, high-profile blockbuster known as AAA Category at the level of games like Red Dead Redemption or God of War. Their game would introduce us to the journey to the west of a monkey king, based on one of the novels considered one of the greatest and most popular in China, published in the 16th century, The Journey to the West. This novel tells us about the pilgrimage of the monk Xuanzang, one of the greatest Chinese religious heroes, and his 3 supernatural disciples in search of Buddhist scriptures. Fighting demons, he communicates with spirits and passes through a land plagued by a multitude of obstacles, both real and imaginary. This Chinese literary canon is at once allegory, satire, and fantasy. In 2017, EA Games CFO Blake Jorgensen talks about Visceral Games' cancelled Star Wars game. And in a statement at the annual Technology, Media, and Telecom Conference, he would talk about the game and linear games. We were trying to build a game that really pushed gameplay to the next level. And as we kept reviewing the game, it continued to look like a style of gaming, a much more linear game that people don't like as much today as they did 5 or 10 years ago. They would not only cancel the video game, but that shut Visceral Games' doors forever. Articles and forums immediately disagreed with this. What happens with so many successful linear games like BioShock, The Last of Us, Wolfenstein, Doom, God of War, Cuphead, and an endless list of successful linear games? Back then, Game Science was already facing a huge challenge in their own country: skepticism, lack of experience, and struggling to find qualified and interested staff for the project, and the fact that no one had ever created a game of that magnitude in China before. Game revenue is dominated by 75% of mobile games that make a lot of money. Everybody told them to keep developing mobile games, but Game Science ignored that advice, and in 2018 they got to work with only 13 people on the team, moved from Shenzhen to Hangzhou, and for 6 years worked constantly. And in 2020 they released a trailer to attract more employees. Led by creative director Yang Qi, influenced by his experience in watercolor painting, some people wonder if it was a real game or CGI effects. A year before its release, many posts were published claiming sexism in the Game Science team, but that would later be known as a boycott. On August 20th, Black Myth Wukong is released in game stores. And in just 24 hours, there were already 3 million simultaneous players reported on Steam. And by the 3rd day, 10 million copies sold and $600 million raised. Today, it has more than 18 million copies sold and almost $1 billion in profits. Black Myth Wukong opens the doors to a whole new era in the video game industry. Not only did it show that more than 18 million people have been fascinated by that linear game, but it also shows that shares of Chinese video game studios reaching an all-time high, and despite boycotts and amateur staff and a small team, swept sales and expectations nationally and internationally. The future is very encouraging for China, since there are about 685 million players in China, which is equivalent to 6 times the population of Mexico and a little more than the population of all Latin America and the Caribbean together. Today, Game Science reports that there is already an expansion in development, and in 2018 at the China Game Conference, they had already communicated their desire to improve in the video game industry. In the past, the Chinese video game industry paid too much attention to quantity and ignored quality to some extent. Therefore, it is hoped that the game industry can accelerate industrial transformation and upgrade as soon as possible to produce high-quality games and assume responsibility for spreading and exporting Chinese culture overseas.